We've all been there. You just finished a large sewing and quilting project and you end up with all these scraps of different sizes. What next? Hey guys, welcome to the Sewing Report. I'm Jen. This channel is all about making sewing and crafts fun and approachable, and we are talking about scraps in this episode. We probably all have a ton of scraps, like teeny pieces to larger pieces from yardage. When you're done with projects, you tend to put them in a bin, let them sit there forever. But how do you actually use them up, try to get the most out of the fabric you purchase, which can be very expensive, and try not to waste too much of your material? I'm going to be taking you through some of my general mindsets and methods in what I do to organize and use up my scraps, and also give you a few ideas for scrappy projects. Let's go over the categories your scraps can fall into. There's large scraps, less than half a yard, but big enough to make a small project like a zipper pouch, backing for a pot holder, or cut up into several small pieces for a quilt. You could even turn them into continuous bias tape. Check out my video on that if you haven't seen it yet. Longer strips wider than 2.5 inches. These could be used for bag handles, binding for smaller projects, or jelly roll quilts. I had a couple 5-inch strips from fat quarters, and I turned them into a big scrunchie that actually fits my thick hair into it. Medium rectangular pieces. These could be used for very small projects, pockets, applique, or cut down into 5-inch or 2.5-inch squares to save for later. Small shorter strips. Some may include parts of the salvage. Depending on the size, you could save for foundation paper piecing, or I tend to use these as fabric leaders. If you start off sewing this before inserting your real fabric, it helps prevent thread nests on the back or your fabric getting pushed down below the needle hole. Scraps are also great for testing out stitches and tension settings on your sewing machine. Smaller odd shapes. If they're large enough, I'll cut down into 2.5-inch squares for scrappy projects, or 1 inch by 4 inches for zipper tabs. 2.5-inch squares can be saved and pieced together like I did with this holiday-themed drawstring bag. And whenever I make anything with a zipper, I've got options for the zipper tab. Currently, I store my scrappy pieces in this fabric basket. No real organization system, but if I need a small piece for something, I dig into this and try to find something that works. Here's a quick scrap buster that can incorporate both larger and smaller pieces. We're making quilted hexagons with self-binding that can double as mug rugs or hot pads. You need a larger piece over 11 inches square for the backing. Insul-Bright polyester batting, canvas, and fabric for the front, which can be whole or pieced together. This is a template I got in a Maxi Makes box. It has 4-inch sides with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but the backing fabric needs to be at least 1 inch larger on all sides. I trimmed off some of the excess fabric and set it aside. Front fabric just needs to be slightly larger than the template. Trace around the whole template with an air or water-soluble pen. Later, I went back and added some quilting lines. You can really do any design, so I did smaller hexagons inside. To keep the layers together, I inserted a few pins at the outside corners. With so many layers, I did increase the sewing machine tension to just over 4 and chose a 3.0 stitch length. Using a walking foot, I stitched right on the marked lines, overlapping a few inches to lock them in place. This is actually quilting because I'm sewing together all the sandwich layers. If you're very new to sewing, I highly recommend you watch my basic stitches video. Now comes the step where I figured out a way to make it easier. You need to cut away all the layers outside the hexagon, but keep the backing fabric. For each side, I fold the backing fabric away from the rest of the sandwich and place the ruler over top. With the rotary blade, cut off the extra batting, canvas, and front fabric, but be careful not to accidentally cut into the backing fabric or the stitch line. Repeat this for all of the sides. Flip back over to the front. Next, we'll be trimming the backing fabric to create the self-binding. You can either do 3/4 of an inch from the stitch line or 1 inch. Here I'm doing 3/4 of an inch, but I found it easier on the next ones to do 1 inch. I also preferred the finished look with the wider binding. On each side, fold in and press the backing fabric right up to the cut edge. Glue basting really helps at this step to keep everything tacked down. Fold over and press a second time, overlapping the front. I'll do every other side first, then the last 3. I advise going a little heavy on the glue. This is my favorite method for self-binding, and it even has faux mitered corners. Last step is edge stitching all around the perimeter. At each of the 6 corners, leave your needle down. Lift the presser foot and pivot. Overlap a few inches to lock those stitches in place. The contrasting thread does really stick out. You can choose a color that closely matches the backing fabric if you want it to blend in. You could probably sew together a dozen of these or more in a day if you do it assembly line style. With smaller hexagon templates like this one that's 2.5 inches on each side, you can make a set of coasters using the same method. The good thing with the coasters is they use even smaller pieces of fabric than the hot pads, and you can piece together scraps for the front. Because these fabrics mostly come from the same coordinating collection, you could gift a set of coasters and a few hot pads, and they look totally intentional. I'm really trying to use up every last bit of my Oasis bundle by FIGO fabrics, and have been able to make 19 different items. As of this video release, I still have a few bundles left in the Sewing Report Etsy shop. Down below in the comments, I'd love to hear your own thoughts on how to deal with scraps, from organization to different uses for scraps. Let us know, share. I'm very interested to see what you guys do with your scraps. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button. And if you're interested in sewing and crafts, subscribe to the Sewing Report. I post videos all the time about lots of different topics, and I have a Learn to Sew series if you're very new to sewing. Anyways, I'm Jen with the Sewing Report. I'll see you guys again in the next video, and remember, whatever you're doing, make it fun.